evening. I hope that you had a lovely day or that you're having a good start of your day, depending on what time it is for you. I'm back after 2 weeks of break. I was on some holiday doing some energy work here and there, and finally I found a moment to kind of write down a transcript for a show that I wanted to do since a while, but there's been always some other topics coming up, but finally this one kind of came up to my mind, and I felt like it would be good to kind of start off with this one after a short break that I had. So the topic for today, as some of you may already know, are the energy diseases. So what is the real cause of a disease or a sickness in the body? What is kind of the energetic reality behind it? And how do we prevent them? How do we deal with them? And how can we relate the diseases to our emotions? And what is that thing with this genetic disease? Because that's something that has been coming up a lot on my personal sessions lately. How do I deal with a disease that has been passed on through my ancestral line? I'm also going to kind of give a certain perspective on typical things like parasites, bacteria, viruses. What is the distinction between those three types? We will also speak a little bit about something that I mentioned a couple of months ago, but it seems like lately this is a topic that kind of keeps coming back again, and these are the global pandemics and kind of attachments to different collective fields through which we might be getting all sorts of diseases. So we will speak about this type of diseases through which you can catch them through your ancestral line or through certain energetic imprints. But there are also certain projections that might be coming from different timelines, and that is quite interesting. I will also explain what is cancer and depression from my perspective, and how do the diseases relate to abductions, ET abductions. And of course, I would like to make a small note, because this is a topic that might sound as if I'm some kind of a medic. Well, I am not. I'm just a spiritual practitioner, and I'm just sharing my perspectives on the energetic reality of things. So this show is just for your own information. You can take this information into consideration, but if you have any kind of disease or illness, make sure to speak about it with the professional. And of course, it is up to your own discernment who is a professional. Maybe I will put it this way. So all of those things about the diseases, all of these things that I am going to share now, I am just sharing them from my own perspective. So I guess we can start. I am first going to answer a question that might be arising in your heads. Is every disease just physical? Like if you catch a flu, or if you have certain chronic disease that you're struggling with. Is it only about the physical body, or is it about something more? So, every single disease in the body is a direct reaction to a certain disharmonic energy that the body is struggling with. We can perceive a condition of a disease as a direct sign from the higher self or the eternal self that there is a certain aspect of ourselves or our multi-layered anatomy that we need to look into. So, for instance, there could be a certain trauma that is getting outpictured as a disease in the biological system. There could be a certain distortion in the DNA, but first it might be in the DNA of the light body, and then it is manifesting in the DNA, in the biochemical DNA of the physical body, and that might be causing a certain disease. but as most of you already know, the distortions in the DNA don't come from, they don't come just randomly, they basically come through different timelines and different things that we have accreted over our incarnational cycles. So there's also a big difference here. The cause of an illness may be also on an emotional, mental, energetic, or biochemical level. Due to massive contamination of the Earth's environment, it may also be a result of the external substances that affect the bioenergetic system. So all sorts of heavy metals, the 5G radiation. This is something that I am not going to focus on tonight, on all of those external things. I will mostly focus on the diseases that kind of need to be healed within, so that we could achieve the internal harmony within ourselves. Even though there are also certain cases when there are certain theoretical bioweapons used, like the particle accelerators or the cell towers, and they could indeed project a certain disease into our bodies. But usually there is a certain reason behind it, or there's a certain opening, and we are going to speak about the openings that allow for the diseases to come into the body. While searching for a cure for a certain disease, it is worth finding out its core cause first, as it may bring essential information about the origin of the disease, its possible connections to the ancestral imprint, past lifetimes, and our DNA characteristics. A disease manifests directly in the physical body when it has reached a critical mass level of disharmonic frequencies on other dimensional levels. Thus, in order to find a solution for this issue, the problem needs to be considered from a few perspectives. So, just a simple example, and I'm going to be giving a few examples that I kind of gathered throughout my own experience. There could be an aspect of yourself that, let's say, you drowned in one of your lifetimes. So there is this subconscious fear of water. But let's say it's also connected to a few other imprints where you were pushed down. So somebody pushed you down the cliff and you drowned. So, for example, in the future incarnations, let's say that somebody is struggling with asthma. And this is just an example, but I'm just showing you how those imprints match. So, asthma is related to breathing. So, having an aspect of yourself that drowned because it wasn't able to catch a breath, right? And all of the lungs were filled in with water. And if there is still that aspect of yourself on that past timeline, and since time is simultaneous and everything is happening at the same time, technically you are still drowning. So whenever a certain situation like this happens, this imprint gets triggered, and it may manifest as asthma until you retrieve that aspect of yourself back, and there could be other imprints on the way. So this is just an example of how those imprints are being triggered. So when we look into the aspect of a disease, which can be also perceived as a difficulty that the body is struggling with when it comes to being able to process the frequencies going through the body, we actually noticed that since we were stuck in this loop of constant reincarnation, we've got a lot of imprints that shape our personality, but at the same time, sometimes they limit it, and sometimes they set certain blockages that we need to find out about and that we need to consciously integrate. And now this includes this lifetime as well. So there could be certain inner child imprints that are causing a certain disease in this lifetime. But usually those inner child imprints are the reflection of what was happening in other lifetimes as well. So we always have to look at it from multiple perspectives. And since we speak about the inner child and the traumatic imprints, there is a certain relationship between the emotional patterns and biological diseases. Because it's like you might think, okay, well, what is the structure behind it, right? How does it work that if you're struggling with a certain emotion, it literally starts to eat you from the inside? And why does that actually manifest as a disease? There's a certain relationship, and I am going to reveal what that relationship is now. And by the way, if you have any questions, if there is anything you would like to ask at the moment, feel free to post the questions. They will be directly relayed to me so that I can answer them. So the biological or the physical body is located on the same dimensional band as the emotional body level, and it is dimension number 2. So just for the reminder, on dimension 1, we've got the etheric body. On dimension 2, we've got the emotional and physical body. They are one. On dimension 3, we've got the mental body. Dimension 4 is the astral body. So even though our point of focus is in the mental body, the physical body is one dimensional level below. And at the same time, the emotional body is the subconscious mind station. That is the governing station of the consciousness of the physical, biological body. Various emotional traumas and imprints, if they are not integrated and properly healed, get stuck in various subfrequency bands of the D2 subconscious mind. So whenever you're going through a certain trauma, it directly gets stuck as an imprint in your subconscious mind. Or you could say in your emotional, physical body. If these imprints are not properly healed, they might manifest as a certain condition of chronic disease in the body until they are recognized, healed, and the trapped energy is reintegrated. These imprints manifest on a physical level when they reach a critical mass of expansion. Emotional imprints, due to their direct interface with the physical structure, are manifesting quickly if they keep being fed by the energy that comes from living through the same type of emotion all over again. So what this means is that you've got all of those imprints in your subconscious mind, and probably you're not even aware of most of them. So what happens is that if you go through a certain trauma, and then you find yourself a couple of years later, or even a few decades later, with an experience that is in some ways similar to the experience you have been through before, you get the same emotional reaction. And that is basically making the imprint larger and larger and larger until it literally starts to manifest as a certain type of blocked energy. And that may manifest as a certain state of sickness in your body. So some diseases, and I would say most of them are always having a certain emotional imprint behind it. So let's say you are having a big issue with your liver. You should kind of close your eyes and ask yourself, what are the feelings behind it? What do I feel when I tap into the energy of my liver? There could be feelings of sadness. There could be feelings of loneliness, abandonment. There could be also anger behind it. There could be all sorts of trapped emotions, and if you will be able to name them, or there could be just a feeling of confusion, of pain. If you will be able to name those emotions, you can trace them, you can basically trace them back in time. When did I feel like this before in my life? Is it when I was 8 years old? Is it when I was 14 years old? And you might find a few moments when you felt like this. And the best way is to come back to the moment when it started and start transforming that emotion from the start point. And how do we exactly transform that? I will get to that later. But basically finding that start point when a certain emotion triggered. And sometimes you might find it even in like a past incarnation. So it happens. But healing it just from this lifetime can be as useful, and then you can start tracing it to other lifetimes as well. And it's gonna be also very helpful to be able to have that expanded perspective on you as multiple identities that kind of came to the moment where there is you, kind of like a cluster of all of those incarnations that you used to be and you will be. And that kind of brings us to the concept of the ancestral imprint. And that's also related to the genetic diseases. So most of the diseases that are labeled as genetic derive from the ancestral imprint that holds energy signatures of experiences, diseases, traumas, etc., all of those different imprints of ourselves and our past, future aspects, as well as the family we incarnated in during this lifetime and other lifetimes as well. So the ancestral imprint is literally like a cluster of all of those different imprints we have experienced throughout different lifetimes. And also the ancestral imprint, what is the most important is that it holds the collective curses, the collective traumas of larger collectives, of families, different bloodlines you have been incarnating with. So now when you look at it this way, let's say you had a lifetime as an Irish and you were carrying that curse of the witches that were a part of that family. And then let's say you incarnated in the United States and you were carrying, and you basically, as you incarnate into, let's say, Colorado, United States, well, you still carry that curse from the Irish lifetime and you bring it into that bloodline that you incarnate in. So if we look at it this way, we have kind of found ourselves at this point where all of those imprints have been blended, messed up, and each one of us carries this huge ancestral burden that we shouldn't carry in the first place. So a part of the healing that each one of us needs to transform within ourselves is actually clearing all of this ancestral burden that has been carried throughout all of the incarnations. And if you heal it with your eternal body, if you use the eternal frequencies for it, you will be able to progressively clear it from all the timelines and all the probability dominions. So this is actually very effective. So you can kind of choose to take that possibility to be a healer for all of your simultaneous aspects of yourself, and they will of course have the free will choice whether they decide to take that healing or not. So every single experience that we go through as we follow the evolutionary path of the soul gets saved as a certain energy imprint in our morphogenetic field structure. And now there is a certain mechanism behind it, because if we think about it this way, okay, like I've got all these curses, all these traumas, but what about the positive experiences? Where are they? Do they also get saved as imprints? And the answer is yes, of course they do. We usually tend to focus on those negative ones that need to be cleared, but there are also many positive aspects of our existence. So I'm gonna explain the mechanics behind it, and I will also provide a few examples how that works. And I would say that this is probably one of the most important things you can get out of what I said so far. So a positive experience or a milestone achieved at a certain point of our path gets saved as a skill, gift, or a life wisdom, and usually directly outpictures throughout next incarnations. For example, activating water codes in the DNA may enable the ability to connect with the water and hear its tones. An individual may start singing these tones, unlocking more of the throat chakra codes that attribute to singing abilities. This gift may evolve in the next lifetime, where the incarnate finds out about its gift to sing and decides to become an opera singer. So this is quite of a funny example, but that's actually the mechanics behind it. So let's say we've got like a woman on Lemuria. So she activates the water codes in her DNA template, or she already incarnates with those codes activated because perhaps she comes from a collective that basically is directly working with the water plasmas. So she decides to take a cycle of incarnations on this planet. She activates her water codes and she's like, okay, well, now I'm gonna start using those water codes. And so she starts to work with the water and she starts to have that ability to hear it, to be able to speak to it and sing the tones of the water. So she starts doing it. And in order to sing, she's also activating certain codes in her throat chakra. And so she developed a new skill. She basically evolved, we can say. She activated new codes, so that means she evolved. So let's say she incarnates again, and let's say that's like 200 years later, and she decides to become a singer because she maybe in that incarnation she doesn't remember much of her past incarnations anymore, but she discovers that ability to sing. And that ability to sing is coming from that Lemurian incarnation. So she decides to become a singer in that lifetime. And that's how those positive experiences are actually turning into new skills and gifts. So if this is not your last incarnation, all of those gifts that you collect in this lifetime, they will be passed along with all the other gifts. They will be passed to another lifetime. So that's a good thing about it. If you're working for something, you will have it in your next lifetimes as well. Maybe not always on a conscious level, but there are certain skills and abilities that we've got. And now, a negative experience, which may be a trauma, curse, or death wish, or any kind of other disharmonic imprint, gets saved as a blockage, overlay, or a black hole, the missing code in the morphogenetic field structure. For instance, if the opera singer, that singer from the previous example, gets cursed in the throat area where she had her codes activated, this results in the blockage on organic throat chakra codes that may result in the issue with the self-expression in the next lifetimes. So this singer, she ends up having the throat chakra blocked, and geez, my throat chakra starts to struggle as I speak about it. That's interesting. So she ends up having those codes blocked, sometimes even taken away by somebody, but let's say they are just blocked. So she cannot sing again until that blockage is removed. And this might also manifest as the issue to express herself freely. So there could be some extra things added into that. So that's how it works. And usually it's like we had multiple abilities from other lifetimes, but they got blocked on the way. And that would be mainly like in the Middle Ages timelines, where there's been so much magic used against us, and then it kind of made us lose some of those amazing abilities that we used to have, and right now we are choosing to reawaken them through the eternal frequencies. And speaking of, I'm just kind of drifting away from the main topic, but there will be new series that I am going to start, and they will be going through June, July, and August. Since there's quite a lot of people like reaching out to me lately and asking about how does this eternal host work, are all the souls going to follow the host, etc., etc., I decided to show my point of view on it. So you can expect that by the end of this week, I am going to release the first video about the path of the eternal host, which I call the path towards remembrance. So you will have the chance to find out what is this eternal Urea body in case you don't know what it is yet, how do we use it, and also a few new information that concern the flames of reclamation, reclaiming so-called the free gifts of the source, and all those very interesting things that I would like to speak about right now, but I better be quiet and come back to the topic that we have about the diseases. So, to kind of summarize what I said so far, we do not only carry the energy imprints from other lifetimes, but also all the other families we have incarnated in. And they are usually located in various areas, on various areas of the planet. So you might be carrying some imprints from like African family that you incarnated in, Italian, German, but you might as well be having an incarnation right now somewhere in Asia. So it's like we incarnate in different families to kind of get those different codes running through our templates, even though when you incarnate into a certain incarnation, you're usually born in a place, well, unless you are born on a fallen timeline, but you usually incarnate into a place to which your codes are corresponding to. So if you are born in Italy in a certain incarnation, your codes correspond to Italy in that lifetime. But let's say if you go for a holiday on Hawaii, you might discover that you also have codes that correspond to Hawaii because you collected them in other lifetimes. So that's kind of how it works. Sometimes an incarnate chooses to come into the same family to resolve all the ancestral burden that it has inherited through its ancestors. So there are also situations when an incarnate goes into the same family again in order to kind of resolve more of the things that kind of haven't been fully healed in that family line. It is important to realize that many souls that carry lots of Christic codes decide for an incarnation in the families which hold a lot of template reversals to assist with transmuting these disharmonic imprints from other souls that are a part of this bloodline. However, this often entangles an individual into a victim-victimizer game, where the critical mass of energy imprints starts to block the soul from fulfilling its purpose. We do not have to take on the ancestral imprint on ourselves. We can consciously choose to transmute it. So I would say that there's been this very old concept. It's no longer functional at the current state of the planetary grids and the level of this drama, that a soul would come into a family line to like heal everybody, and like it would take all those imprints on itself, and then it would actually end up getting stuck, so it would have to reincarnate again, and then it would reincarnate into another family, and it would bring more and more imprints. Well, that's not the case anymore. We do not have to take other people's karmic burden on ourselves. We have enough of it ourselves. So when it comes to the ancestral imprint and how it relates to diseases, there could be all sorts of diseases that have been passed on you through your ancestors. But if you consciously choose to clear all those ancestral entanglements, you do not have to get the same diseases as your ancestors. You don't have to die in the same way as they did, because that's kind of blocking your own free will choice at this point. We can also perceive it this way. So when it comes to the genetic diseases, they are being transmitted through the ancestral imprint, but you have the power to transmute it consciously through working on self-integration. So I've received a question here. Does a soul return to the same family again and again, always coming back as a child with Down syndrome every incarnation? So I would say that, well, that's actually interesting. I would say that the soul is not returning to the same family again and again, not from my perspective. There are cases when it does. So, for example, like if there's been certain cases where there's been like a big similarity, let's say, between like a daughter and her great grandmother. And then it turns out that it was the same soul, kind of like finishing certain things that needed to be healed in the family line. But usually that's not the case. Sometimes it happens, but it's always like a personal choice of the soul. From my perspective, the Down syndrome, I'm just tuning in with that specific disease imprint because I must say I didn't analyze this one. But I would say that children with the Down syndrome are actually, it's not like they are, I would say that they are quite special. I would kind of compare them a little bit to children with autism, where they didn't fully anchor themselves into the body. I kind of see that they have very little consciousness in the body. And there is one thing you should notice about the children with the Down syndrome, that they are always having beautiful hearts, that they are so good, that they are always smiling and they are always so joyful. I know that some people say that these are like the fallen souls incarnating to the body for redemption. Personally, I don't agree with that. I would say that a person with the Down syndrome is actually like, it's as if you've got like a very high consciousness. You could say of almost like an ascended master, like a very, very high consciousness that partially incarnates on Earth, but it's like they are here as certain anchoring points, while that higher identity is kind of like broadcasting those high frequencies through the body and through the biofield of that individual. So from my perspective, they are, it doesn't really matter how long they will live or like whether they will manage to like achieve something on a global scale. That's not really their purpose. They are here to spread very high, beautiful Christic frequencies. I would say the Christic frequencies of the virtues. So they choose to incarnate here, and it's like they incarnate only partially. Only a part of their consciousness is fully anchored in the body. The rest is out. That's why there are very like low mental body. That's why they have like a very low mental body capacity, because they are not fully anchored in their 3D ego consciousness. A part of them is somewhere else, and they cannot even fully explain that. So that's how I perceive it. And I don't know, I just get like beautiful warm waves in my heart chakra as I speak about them. So thank you for that question. I would say that they are actually very beautiful people, and they are quite precious. So if you know any kind of children with that syndrome, if you have any in your family, you should protect them. So anyways, let's get to speaking now about parasites, bacteria, and viruses. And I still have like a lot of things to go through, so I need to hurry up a little bit. Okay, so when it comes to parasites, what are they? What are bacteria and what are the viruses? I will just read the definition and then I will elaborate more on it. So parasites are twisted elemental consciousness that comes into the body and directly blends its DNA structure with the DNA structure of the victim. Very often, parasites are connected to an entity that manipulates them in order to begin a progressive process of infiltration of the identity. Parasites may also be the cause of the black goo in the body. So, theoretically, diseases like COVID or, well, the flu sometimes as well, they are actually parasitic diseases. That's why so many people kind of felt like they lost themselves through the COVID disease. Well, that's because that infiltrator is kind of still there. And it's still affecting the identity in some way. We've got also bacteria, which is a biological form whose primal intention was to create a symbiotic relationship between itself and the body it inhabits, supporting the larger structure in biochemical processes. So there used to be like the organic bacteria that we also have in our body that, you know, they are usually in the digestive system assisting with the entire process. They used to naturally exist in the environment to kind of support us with those microbiological processes our bodies are going through. However, some of the bacteria species got hijacked and their organic functions have been reversed to cause chaos in the environment and biological organisms. So basically what happened is that the bacteria started to turn their back against us. And now there's a lot of bacteria which are actually poisoning the body. And that's a result of the manipulation of those small bodies. Basically, the bacteria used to be good, and it's like if you tune in, like if I were to tune in with the collective field of the bacteria, their primordial intention was to actually serve the human race and all the other life forms, animals and plants. They were supposed to support us with kind of maintaining the connection between the atomic consciousness and the cellular consciousness, because a cell is already like a cluster of a certain amount of atoms. So they would be kind of keeping that balance. They would be able to heal even on the subatomic level. But what happened is that this kingdom of bacteria got basically hijacked. And right now we've got all of those impostor bacteria that cause all sorts of unpleasant diseases. And when it comes to viruses, they don't exactly exist. A virus is almost like a twisted consciousness that tries to take over the body, and that triggers the autoimmune response of the biological structure. So the reason why there aren't really any specific medication for the virus is because it was never isolated, because it's not really physical. It's kind of like you've got this twisted consciousness that comes into the body, but this twisted consciousness is more like on other levels. It's either like on the etheric or the astral level or even like higher dimensional levels. But like it's emitting certain frequencies. It's creating a certain harness field in the body. And our immune system is starting to sense that harness field. So the immune system starts to think like, oh, there's like a certain impostor in the body that we need to deal with. So like we turn on all the mechanism and like the fever and all the other reactions, while that consciousness starts to infiltrate the body. So the immune system is doing the right thing. It starts to kind of like block that from taking place. But all of those diseases that are caused by a certain virus, like COVID or flu or whatever, they are sometimes bacterial, actually. It's not always the virus itself. But all of them are basically a state where the body is going through the internal battle, because it's trying to fight off all of those harmful frequencies that are being broadcasted to the body. I hope that makes sense. So there's like a certain distinction. Out of those three, I would say that parasites are the worst, because they directly start to blend with your DNA. So later on, they might even lead to cancer. But I will get to what cancer is about a little bit later. But they are basically starting to modify the DNA structure, so they might be also affecting our organic DNA coding and later on distort the biochemical processes. And now, how to discern whether a disease is just physical or if there is more to it? You might wonder, like, is this just physical or is this just energetic, or how do I make a distinction? A disease is definitely not physical if there is no logical physical explanation to its root cause. A dysfunction of certain organ or disbalance of hormones in the body don't explain where the disease is coming from. It only explains why we are suffering from a certain affliction, but not why some organs don't work properly. Nowadays, a disease can be easily inserted into the body, either through a program sent into the unconscious mind, which is the dimension 1, consciousness of the atoms, or into the subconscious mind, which is the D2 consciousness of the body. So just kind of coming back to what I just said, that let's say you go for a diagnosis of your illness, and let's say they detect certain distortions in your blood, and that apparently is like, this is proving that you have a certain disease. But what is the structure behind it? Why do you have those distortions in the blood on the first place? And then they might say, okay, this is coming from a distortion in your DNA. Okay, but where is the distortion from the DNA coming from? And you can just kind of keep asking and asking and asking until the doctors will be like, well, we've got no idea. There is just a certain distortion, right? And then you have to search for it yourself. So it's not just about detecting the disease, like what is it that is going on with my body, but also where is this coming from? What is the structure behind the manifestation of the disease on the first place? And yes, as I said in the last sentence, the disease can be also easily inserted into the body. However, such process usually takes place through triggering the inactive imprints that already exist there. That's why clearing the ancestral imprint and other opening points is so important. It helps to minimize such incident from happening. There are also cases where our higher identity allows itself to take a certain illness to clear an imprint that have been stuck on different subharmonic levels for a long time, allowing the identity through the manifestation of that imprint to recognize it and begin the active process of its healing. So what is really interesting is that when we look at the state of disease or the state of being sick, it's always our body trying to show us something, like, hey, something is wrong, look into it. So our higher identity is sometimes choosing to release certain imprint to kind of make it manifest so that we can finally look into it. Because as I said, certain problems kind of keep going for centuries. And then there's like a really big issue to kind of properly manage them. Before I get into the next question, I received one in the chat. So, is the 7 trumpets phenomenon can cause diseases, or they just mess with our thoughts? From my perspective, and as I said, I am gonna start releasing the videos on the mechanics of the eternal creation and stuff like that very, very soon. So that will give us more clarity. However, the way that I see it is that with the trumpets and that phenomenon of the trumpets running from 2016, this is kind of the time when a lot of things started to get twisted in the planetary grids. And that was basically starting to also coincide with other bioweapons being released to the planet. So like we had the 5G, we had the COVID, and all of the other things that kind of started coming up. We were facing a lot of interference from something referred to as the cosmic eye. Luckily, that's not the case anymore. So there's been just a lot of things kind of projected at the same time. Whether these were the trumpets that were causing physical or mental dysfunctions, I will leave it to everybody's personal discernment. But the way that I see it is that we had the trumpets, but at the same time, there's been a lot of reversed plasmas coming to the grids. A lot of reversed plasmas from different fallen collectives. So we literally kind of found ourselves, and we are right at the end of this cycle, but we found ourselves in the plasma war that was pretty much invisible to most of us. So if you are being hit with the reversed plasma, this is starting to mess with your plasma body anatomy, obviously, causing the dark flowering effect. And I'm going to speak about the dark flowering, so I'm glad that this question came up. And that started, and we also had that, I would say, the epidemic of the black goo everywhere. It's really like a disease that is spreading everywhere. So the trumpets got triggered at a specific point in time where a lot of other things were set in motion. So there could have been like a combination of the trumpets and the cell towers and different experimentations that were coming from the particle accelerators. So I would say these were a couple of things at the same time. But the trumpets should have been stopped much sooner. I would say that with the eternal frequencies that we have available right now, I kind of wish they were more available sooner, because that's when we would be able to stop that entire trumpet drama, we could literally say. But we are at the end of this cycle. Whether we will get more trumpets, I don't know. But luckily now we can buffer ourselves from the trumpets with the eternal creation energies, the rainbow plasmas from the Nomi seed that I've been speaking about many times. So the trumpets shouldn't be a problem as much as they used to be throughout the past 7 years. So I hope this makes sense. And I received a question here. Are you familiar with exosomes that are released by the immune system during a virus? If so, do you think that exosomes are emotions or the body's response to that negative energy or toxin? I remember the name exosome from biology classes, but as you can probably imagine, I didn't pay much attention at school. But the way that I see it, when I tune in with that, and this is quite interesting, so every single cell has its core, right? Every single atom has its core. So the natural ability of the body shall be that, let's say, if we are struggling with an infection that was spread by a virus, and let's say we are having issues with the lungs, inside of the lung and inside of each organ in the body, there is something that is referred to as the core crystal, which is basically the core of each organ. And every single cell also has its own core and every single atom, obviously. So I kind of see it this way, that the exosomes are being released from the core of each cell and each atom, and they start to overwrite that twisted consciousness, which is the virus. So our bodies, even though we still carry a part of the mutations, we are basically able to still defend ourselves very well. So to a certain degree, we should have more trust in our bodies, because they can basically heal us through the conscious work and self-communication that we have with our bodies. So that's how I see it. They are basically, these are like the core energies that are being used to heal the infection. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's get to the dark flowering and diseases. Since I already touched base on the plasma body, I'm just going to jump to that subject straight away. So the dark flowering distortions represent reversals in the lotus anatomy of the internal creation plasma body that manifest directly as black goo on the level of the light body, the external creation template. I guess that's what we already all know. Dark flowering on the level of the plasma template can be perceived as a disease that causes the progressive dysfunction of the organic plasma flows and poisons the natural plasma lotuses, creating a static field in the plasma template. Such affliction has direct implications on the emotional, mental, and physical body systems. When it comes to the emotional consequences, and this is something that I was speaking about very much in detail during my dark flowering videos. There are like 2 parts, like about 2 hours each, about the dark flowering effect. So I'm not going to elaborate too much on it. If you want like the full information about it, feel free to check those videos out. However, for the emotional body, this would be depression, numbness, moral crisis, reversal of the spiritual virtues, sometimes the narcissistic personality, and at times also sociopathic tendencies. So this is how the dark flowering is pretty much like poisoning the emotional body, because all those reversals of the spiritual virtues are actually pretty much, we can treat it as the disease of the emotional body. We also have the mental consequences of that, and that may include the unfamiliar thoughts, the self-destructive patterns, lack of clarity, and weak memory. This might be originating from the dark flowering infection from the plasma body. And there's also direct physical implications that may include the heaviness in the eyes, small vitality levels, so like very little energy in the body, and dysfunction of various organs, mainly due to the infection of the organs with the black goo nanoparticles. And speaking of black goo, and again, that's something that I spoke about, and as I said before, it's kind of like a disease. It started spreading through the internal creation, and that's when the black dragons kind of lost control over it. So they were like, okay, well, so now we lost control of it, so we can only partially keep control of it. So we are just gonna spread it to the external creation, and we'll see how it goes. And here we are. So the black goo has been projected on multiple timelines of the planet, and it's been like a real big issue. So the black goo grows like a disease in the body. Its expansive nature is a result of the fact that this twisted consciousness sucks in all the energy that it finds on the way and reverses it completely, leading to the quick self-replication and infection of the bioenergetic system. The black goo force is the main bioweapon that stands behind the contemporary diseases, such as the flu, COVID, etc. And that's why the recovery process is so long. So like your body is partially managing to fight off the imposter, but there's still a matter of that black goo, and that black goo is basically causing a lot of changes in the mental body, emotional body, but also the physical structures. The chronic fatigue is usually like a result of a really big amount of the black goo that is in the physical body structures as well as the etheric body. All right, and that brings us to the next question. Do we need any external substances to help ourselves? So here's my perspective on it. And again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not skilled in healing any diseases whatsoever. I'm only skilled at giving an energetic background on them, and then you can do anything you want with this perspective. You can just say, okay, that doesn't make sense, I reject it, or you can say, well, this does make sense, I want to work on my disease from another perspective as well. So we do not need any external substances to help ourselves. Our bodies are full of healing energies that can be reawakened through various modalities to enable the regeneration of various layers of our multidimensional anatomy. The healing energies shouldn't be taken from the outside of ourselves, since the planetary environment holds quite big amount of the reversed currents, but they need to be accessed from the inside. That's what the plasma template and the eternal urea templates are for. So there's many like modalities that kind of like draw the energies from the environment, and then they use those energies for healing. Well, from my perspective, the best approach is to use the energies that you already have inside of your body, because these are your energies. Nobody could twist them. And at the moment, it's about healing yourself. So you don't need anybody to heal you except for yourself. There could be some people kind of like telling you, maybe you should work on this and this and this. You can apply this type of techniques. And that's how I'm working with people through kind of like a type of a conscious guidance. But it's about you healing yourself. It's time to realize that we are all our own healers. So the energies of your own plasma template and your eternal body can be utilized for that harmonization. The healing starts from the within. So in order to start that inner transformation, you need to find the energies on the inside of you that will enable you for that. And this plasma template and the urea body are exactly used for that. So let's say if you have your plasma template that is composed of the 5 elemental layers, you can use your water body to heal the waters within your own biological system. You can use your ether body to vaporize any toxins. So you can play with your elemental bodies all along, as long as they are clear themselves. Or you can just use directly the eternal energies of your urea body to enable the deep healing. The urea body looks like a shimmer layer inside of your system. That's the best way to describe it. It's kind of like a shiny layer that has a form of a mist, a vapor. And that vapor body, that vapor shimmer body, can be used for all sorts of different transformations. And some of you may wonder, what about different herbal medicine applications, or different diets, or eating fresh, healthy food? So this is connected to the elemental co-creation. And it is good to realize that even though it's not really about like just healing yourself with like eating healthy and stuff, it's about like kind of like blending those two aspects where you're using your internal energies, but you obviously need to eat and obviously you need to drink water. So make sure that it's organic, make sure that it's coming from a good source, so that you're doing both, that whatever you bring from the outside to the inside of your body is as pure as all of the energies that you're using for your inner healing. So we can co-create with the elemental force. A part of the mass healing that needs to occur on a planetary level is re-establishing the mutual understanding between the elemental kingdom and the human race. Elements are building blocks of our physical as well as energetic bodies. This means that realigning the elemental, which equals biochemical balances in the body, will lead us towards restoring the organic imprint for health. Christic co-creation with the elements can assist us with this process. Thus, all gifts from Mother Earth, such as spring water, plants, herbs, or just pure fresh air, can bring deep healing as long as we treat every single one of these components as a conscious substance. And we always ask for permission from the eternal self of these elements if we may co-create with them, as they can feel our emotions, thoughts, etc. They can discern our true intentions. So if we look at it this way, we are all made of elements. The ether is kind of like the base for all of the elements, but for example, the earth element would correspond to our bones and different vitamins and minerals of our body. The water element would correspond to all of the liquids, such as the blood or the lymph that goes through our body. The fire element would correspond to the temperature. The air element would correspond to the organs that we use for breathing. So we are actually composed of different combinations of the elemental force. So that's why I wouldn't really treat it as being very external if you're taking any kind of herbs and stuff like that. You can basically co-create with the elements exactly in the way that I just explained it. And I'm gonna jump to a completely different subject. I'm just jumping between different contexts today because there's so much to say. And we are going to speak now a little bit about the global pandemics and the attachments to the collective fields. And some of you that have been working with me, I've been doing that with some of you, basically like going back in time and like clearing yourself from all of those different pandemics that took place on the planet, and later on like they've been affecting us. So now I will explain the mechanics behind it more in detail. So the global pandemics, such as the plague, COVID, or the Spanish flu, have been deliberately inserted into the planetary timelines to cause a domino effect. Getting sick during one of these pandemics indicates getting an imprint that triggers getting sick on all other timelines when another pandemic took place. So let's say you got sick during the plague, well, then you probably got sick, and the plague was like in the Middle Ages. So then you probably got sick during the Spanish flu if you incarnated in that period, and then you probably got sick for COVID as well. So it's kind of like it's giving you a certain attachment, a certain energy imprint that gets triggered whenever a certain pandemic takes place. The worst pandemic from energetic perspective was the plague, and as it was connected with other dark magic events that took place on the Middle Ages timeline. And luckily this timeline is right now being healed, buffered, so that there's not so much interference coming from it anymore. Energy of suffering and pain of all the people that got sick back then has been used for multiple rituals. This energy has been projected into our timeline in 2019 during the COVID pandemic. So this kind of sensation of like waiting for something and like not knowing what's gonna happen, all that weird energy that was like hanging in the air during the first years of the pandemic was actually coming from the fact that the same kind of sensation, the same kind of encryption and energy was coming from the Middle Ages timeline when the plague started. So it's kind of like those two timelines got blended for a while, and that's why there's been so much panic, and that's why there's been so many also like psychological implications, because many people that died during that pandemic during the Middle Ages, which is like also referred to as the Black Death, and that basically says everything. The Black Death, meaning that you kind of got connected to a dark egregor, which I would say is the egregor of death. Anyways, that connection has also brought all of those different traumas that we carried from that period. So there's been also a good aspect about it, since it kind of brought our attention back to kind of looking into what happened during the Middle Ages, investigating that situation, and then starting to manage it. However, it had quite serious implications also on our emotional level, where those aspects from the Middle Ages need to be brought back and integrated. The human collective consciousness field also holds multiple insertions of diseases that many families or individual souls are connected to. Hypochondria, which is a fear of getting ill, like you constantly think like, oh my gosh, I'm cold, so I will get sick, blah, blah, blah. Hypochondria may be a result of being connected to a really big number of these collective fields that carry imprints of these diseases. And there are all sorts of collective fields, like of people being mentally ill, collective consciousness of the flu, of cancer, etc. So people who suffer from being a little bit hypochondric, this doesn't come from nowhere. It's like they feel those imprints in their bodies, and they are only like waiting for those imprints to come out. So it's like their consciousness is constantly focused on like those imprints starting to come out, because they are subconsciously aware that they hold those imprints, that they hold those connections to those fields. And also, and like this is not personal, this is not directly targeted at anybody. However, what some of the doctors do, usually subconsciously, is connecting us to these collective fields while trying to find a diagnosis for our affliction. So usually with the diagnosis, there comes an attachment to that collective field. And that is like the biggest issue with kind of like diagnosing. Connection to these collective fields may be also a result of containing this disease in our ancestral imprint. Clearing this attachment and the imprint of the disease can significantly improve the condition of the body and prevent from the disease to spread further. So we can easily remove those connections, we can easily dissolve those cords. And that takes place especially through, you can kind of like, it can be even like a very simple exercise where you just have like a piece of paper and you start to write down all the diseases you are afraid of. And your subconscious will actually suggest you like, I'm afraid of the lung cancer. I'm afraid of malaria. I'm afraid of the Ebola virus. And you just write all of them down. And then you try to sense where those imprints are in your body. So that's gonna be easy to locate. Let's say you've got the Ebola, so that would be in your blood. If you've got the lung cancer and you're afraid of getting it, probably because your ancestors used to get sick for it, the imprint must be in your lungs. and you're using your eternal vapor body to vaporize all those cords. You might see cords, imprints, contracts, connections, and you basically use your vapor body to release them. But it starts with kind of being honest with yourself and making a list of what kind of diseases am I afraid of, and how do I actually clear them. So moving forward, we've got also a context of diseases and abductions. So I'm gonna read what came up to me here, and I'm also probably going to add a little bit of information myself. So when an identity experiences abductions, that could also occur on a physical or astral level, there could be all sorts of manifestations. So there could be all sorts of modifications, not manifestations, but modifications that are done to the multidimensional structure. The main reason behind abductions or the ET interference include stealing the genetic material for interbreeding, and that may include the sperm or the eggs for all sorts of hybridization programs. We've got insertions of implants or various artificial devices, usually to block someone's potential or their skills. And usually those implants are placed on different areas of the nervous system. Or it may involve the direct interference into the DNA template, which includes extracting or inserting various DNA codes and sequences. And usually interference into the DNA is doing the biggest amount of harm. Consequences of abductions may arise on the emotional level. We've got the trauma stuck in the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, or on the energetic level. It may prevent us from accessing certain information about ourselves, or prevent us from full activation of our personal gifts and skills. However, abductions may also have direct implications on the level of the physical body system, usually in the area of the nervous system and the cardiovascular system, since usually the nervous system is targeted, because if you have any kind of psychic skills or different sorts of abilities, the information from higher dimensions, they need to anchor in your body for conscious perception, for kind of they need to anchor in your body in order to get into your conscious mind. So they anchor through the nervous system. So that's why the neurogenesis is so important when it comes to rediscovering our gifts and skills and their activation, because it's the nervous system that has all of those neurotransmitters that are responsible for receiving all of those information. So that's why they are targeting those areas to actually affect our ability to get the information from other dimensions, or they may sometimes keep the nervous system online, or kind of even increase its function, but we end up getting false information because of those distortions in the nervous system. But the abductions may also end up with manifestation of the autoimmune diseases due to the attempt to fight off the artificial technology and substances from the body. So that's when the body is literally attacking itself because of those artificial substances and chemicals that the body is trying to clear. Abductions may continue from one incarnation to the other, or may be happening on a few timelines at the same time. The best way to manage abductions is to go back in time to the moment it initially started, as well as clearing any contracts with the fallen collectives. The main objective is to release the alien technology that usually phase locks the nervous system and doesn't allow for reaching certain states of consciousness. So it's about releasing that phase lock that is being inserted directly on your nervous system. And there are two more things that I would like to speak about. Before I get into those short questions where we look into like what is depression, cancer, and a little bit about also like what is the fever, the state of fever, why the body actually raises its temperature when it's getting sick. We are going to look into something that is referred to as the organic imprint for health and the 8-cell cluster that can be found in the bone marrow. So, the organic imprint for health is stored within the 8-cell cluster located in the tailbone. Even though our cells get replenished every 7 years, these 8 cells are primordial and they keep the structure for manifestation of the entire bioanatomy. It is also a location of the organic imprint for health that originally was supposed to provide us the potential of the eternal life, which is held on the 12th subharmonic of each one of the DNA strands. Massive interbreeding campaigns and DNA modifications caused a mutation of the 8-cell cluster, taking the eternal life gift potential against our free will. So we all in the past used to be eternal. Our bodies didn't need to die. We didn't have to incarnate from one body to another. We could have stayed in a single body, let's say for like 300 years. We would do all our work here, and then we would be able to transfigure the entire atomic quantum and get out of here to another realm. But this is not the case anymore, as I said, mainly because of the interbreeding and all of the DNA modifications that went along with it. So there is a certain way that I am going to share how you can start working with your 8-cell cluster, how you can start improving its functions. And about the eternal life potential and all of it, I will speak more about it when I go into that new series of videos about the eternal host and the eternal creation, because it's actually like a very important aspect of our existence, where we were kind of like programmed to believe that, okay, we are living like 80 up to like maybe 100 years the most, but like we don't live longer. Actually, we should be living much, much, much longer. That would only depend on us, how long we want to stay on this planet. So it's kind of like as we start to activate our eternal body, that memory, that consciousness is coming back. So an easy way to start working with the 8-cell cluster in the tailbone, especially if you struggle with episodes of the pain in this area or if you have any chronic pains in your tailbone, the easy way is to send your eternal body, your eternal urea body. As I said, you can kind of imagine it looks like a vapor shimmering layer that is located inside of your body. And you send that urea body to the inside of the 8-cell cluster. Try visualizing the 8 cells in front of you as if you are projecting them out on the back of your forehead. So you send your urea body there to that 8-cell cluster in the tailbone, and you try to visualize those 8 cells as if you are able to see them. You may either sense trapped energies there, see any black or distorted structures on these cells, or you can also ask your eternal self to point you out any specific programs that are distorting the organic biochemical processes in the body. So whatever you discover in your 8-cell cluster, the procedure of clearing is actually quite simple. You can use the eternal vapors of your urea body to vaporize any distortions from there. So you're kind of using that vapor to vaporize all the distortions that are in the 8-cell cluster. Then connect the 8-cell cluster directly to your source window, which is between your chakra 3 and 4, where the eternal 0 point is, and directly ask the source, the eternal consciousness, to assist you and help you restore the gift of the eternal life into your structure. And not just into your structure, but also to all of the timelines, to all of the aspects of yourself on different timelines and different probability dominions. So when I spoke about that place between chakra 3 and 4, where we have like the core of our eternal body, in the core of that eternal body, we have something that is referred to as the source window. It's looking like a gentle, small, pale blue-white diamond. And we can use that energy, that opening is basically, that window is directly connecting us to the source field. So we can use that energy from the source field to connect it with the 8-cell cluster, and these source energies will start restoring those organic imprints. I hope that makes sense. I am gonna speak more about the source window again, like on this new video series that I will be releasing in my own time. Okay. So here comes a question. What is depression? What kind of, how we can perceive it from another perspective? Depression is a result of the traumatic imprints that the identity is subconsciously trying to process. Critical mass of inner child fragmentations and soul aspects stuck on different timelines may trigger manifestation of these disharmonic energy imprints in form of panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, and such. That is because time is simultaneous. If there are some aspects of ourselves going through a trauma that haven't been integrated, this means that they still go through the same trauma, and they manifest it into our present experience. So if you have any inner child aspects that still go through a certain trauma imprint, they are still projecting that out into your present experience, because everything happens in the now. So if right now you're having any fragmentations, they are still going through that traumatic experience. So their conscious integration is very important to release the trauma. Basically, going back in time and changing the circumstances of the experience, changing the environment, as well as speaking to that aspect of yourself, is very helpful when it comes to integrating all those aspects. Because if you hold the critical mass of those imprints, that's how the depression is manifesting. I hope that makes sense. And when it comes to cancer, and this information literally came to me this morning, and I think it's quite interesting. So that's how it works from the way I have seen it. So cancer can be described as a condition of internal fight within the body. It happens when the impostor that inhabits the human body begins the intense process of blending its DNA with the template of the victim. The blending starts at a specific anchor point, which served as the initial opening for a certain being to come. The cancer cells reflect a twisted consciousness that has a life of its own, and its main objective is to deplete the body of its organic quantum and eventually hijack the soul itself. One can be prone to cancer due to the patterns held within the ancestral imprint, or due to a large number of traumatic emotional imprints that create a biological opening in the second DNA strand, allowing for infiltration to take place. So what happens is that there is this twisted consciousness that has a plan to hijack the body, and it's basically starting to use those openings that are already there. And usually they are in the second DNA strand, because this one is corresponding to the physical body. So the main aspect of fighting cancer from the energetic perspective is to start raising the frequencies of the body and taking the impostor out. And then usually after the process of taking the impostor out of the body, there are usually 2 or 3 months of integration, where the identity is basically adjusting to kind of being without it, because it's been a part of its identity for a while. So that's kind of like an adjustment period. And then it starts to progressively recover and also heal its DNA template, because I would say the worst thing about the cancer is that it's leaving a lot of twisted DNA sequences, and later on those DNA sequences need to be healed throughout the next incarnations to come. And the last question, shall I kill the fever when I am sick? What's the deal with that fever, and why were we actually kind of like, why there's so many medication on the market that kind of like, you can just take a syrup and kill the fever? Well, that's actually not a way to go about it. So the fever is a natural reaction of the immune system to an impostor in the body or a certain disharmonic energy. Our physical system increases its frequency, bringing in more energy to the body and increasing the speed of the neuronal circuits, which are the electric circuits of the body, to fight off and override any disharmonic frequencies in the body. Fever is supposed to accelerate the process of energy transmutation. When we experience cold and heat waves, and the cold waves are contracting, the heat waves are expanding, we are actually adjusting our biosystem and rewiring the neuronal circuits to be able to successfully process a new amplified spectra of frequency. So many people who are like very sensitive to like processing the energies from the planetary grids, when you experience those cold waves and heat waves going through your body, that is actually a result of experiencing those different shifts that start to take place within your nervous system. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so I would say that would be it when it comes to the energy diseases. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope you found this topic enjoyable. I enjoyed it a lot when I was writing it down, maybe because I kind of missed doing the transmissions. And as I said, I will be back soon with new information, and I will be doing this probably outside of my weekly shows. I will see about that. However, around the summer solstice, I'm going to release the first episode of the Path Towards Remembrance, which means we will learn about the gifts of the Eternal Host. So this will be like a totally new type of information that I think each one of us will benefit from when it comes to kind of understanding what's going to happen to our souls during the host period. So for now, I would say that this would be it. I hope that you enjoyed the show tonight, and I am looking forward to connecting with you next week. Bye bye.